Welcome to the Inspiration North podcast, inspiring stories from inspirational people and how they found their passion, their true north. I'm James Eves.
And I'm Michelle Minikin, and this is the Inspiration North podcast.
Today's episode, you can absolutely achieve whatever you want with Ammar Mirza. We talk about failure shouldn't be your goal, practice rather than preach, and having hope is one of the best things a human can have.
Ammar Mirza CBE is a serial entrepreneur with interests and investments across a number of sectors. Over a 15-year period, he has helped establish several hundred new businesses within the Northeast. As chairman and founder of Asian Business Connexions, a not-for-profit social enterprise that aims to connect, support and promote the Asian wider community, Ammar has helped make a significant social and economic impact across the globe. He is the founder of the charity The Pie Project, primary inspiration through enterprise, whose mission is to build effective business education links to support the development of young people and strengthen communities. He launched the Primary to Prosperity campaign in 2018, giving people a mindset that we can achieve anything. Amongst a load of other things, he is on the business support board with the Northeast LEP, a visiting professor of innovation and enterprise for Newcastle University Business School, and he hosts a business show every Friday morning on Spice FM.
Thanks for joining us, Ammar. Pleasure to meet you finally. First question for you, why do you love the Northeast?
Thanks, James, and equally delighted to be part of this. And I suppose quite simply, I was born here, and being born on the banks of the River Tyne on Armstrong Road, where industry had pretty much kicked off, was an incredible experience. Not that I can remember it because it was many moons ago, but you could look out from Armstrong Road and see the river and then the valley and further down the road, Armstrong Works were there, Vickers were there. These are incredible individuals. And from a very early age, I realised what a wonderful place this Northeast is. And that's because of the people. We're very, very hospitable. Now, for me, I was born in a very orthodox and a religious environment. So my parents were devout Muslims. And that was quite an interesting upbringing because, culture, religion, big influences. But equally, the locality. So we played out. Growing up, some of the best memories were playing outside and building buggies and, sort of falling down and grazing your knees and those type of things. And I just felt as if it was a wonderful place, and it always ever has been, and that was Newcastle. And then as I've got older, it's extended to the whole of the Northeast, and you realise, because we were saying earlier on, whether you're a Mackham or you're a Geordie or you're a Smoggy or whatever that is. And, actually, we're all really industrious people. And what's quite unusual, so you've probably gathered from my accent as well, what's quite unusual for me was being a Geordie and being an Asian, but being a Geordie first. As in, and I love that. And so growing up here, as I said, mum and dad were quite very religious, but dad was equally very educated and quite liberal in his approach, although things like we weren't allowed to watch Top of the Pops, right, in case we were influenced. Simple things like that. But equally, dad was a poet and had written a number of books, and at the time it was quite unusual for certainly from communities to be as educated as Dad was. So he taught at Wickham Comprehensive, he lectured at Newcastle University, and he was the community leader at that time. But they were all really, really industrious. So some of the first memories were going down to Sunday market, where we had markets, and we had a prime spot, and being stood around the marketplace and just spectating people and watching people, which was fabulous as a child. And then seeing people sell, and then Mum and Dad had bought all of Pitt Street, which is directly opposite, all of the shops at Pitt Street, which is directly opposite St James's Park, and seeing match days and things like that. All of these things contributed to the pride and the passion that exists and sort of manifested itself over the years. I love the Northeast, and even more so now. And what's quite sad at times is, unless you're from the Northeast, you don't really get it.
No.
Yeah. And a lot of the time you see the Northeast being featured for all of the wrong reasons.
Yes.
And don't get me wrong, yes, of course we're deprived, we're disadvantaged, there's sometimes less opportunities. But on the flip side, gosh, there's so many great things that have happened here and that can continue to happen.
Definitely.
So, yeah, I love the Northeast. And I suppose, over the years, and just to talk a little bit about myself and my upbringing. So we'd gone from being very affluent.
Yeah.
So Mum and Dad. And Dad had 2 wives. So I don't know whether that was a good thing or a bad thing for him, but at one point we lived next door to each other. So my mum and my stepmum lived next door, and Dad would split the time between both of them. But he was, from a cultural point of view, a very orthodox, authoritarian type of individual. So, we were disciplined, as in all of us, quite significantly. And then Dad got a job in Saudi and decided to sell everything, and left my mum and some of my siblings here with nothing. So that was a distinctly interesting time for us, to have gone from being like one of the most affluent families in Newcastle. I remember us being one of the first people in Newcastle to get a video recorder.
Oh, wow.
And these were piano key type video recorders, and I remember going down to Curry's in Northumberland Street to buy it at the time. So my point being is to go from that to Mum being literally out on the streets with 4 kids. It's quite a traumatic experience.
Yeah.
And it was a very informative experience. And I think that was one of the key drivers for me, going from where we were to abject poverty. Highlights being Jammy Dodgers on a weekend, or the radio times and Christmas, so we could just see what was on television. Christmas presents and things like that were not just unusual, unheard of, really. And Mum started to work, and worked tirelessly, 18-hour days, to bring us up, but in parallel to do as well as she could. So, the most influential person in my life, without a doubt, was my late mother. And what an incredible person. She'd done everything she could to work really, really hard. And then eventually started to buy properties, or the property we were living in, which she'd rented, she bought, and then bought the flat upstairs, and then started buying more and more. To one point, she owned quite a significant amount of property. But then there was the market crash in the late 80s, early 90s. So her properties, so these pairs of flats, were worth on a Sunday £100,000. The following day, the council were compulsory buying them back for £500.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's a bloody big kicking, to say the least. And Mum didn't believe in mortgages and loans. So unlike other people, where actually the properties they owned a small amount, and it was the bank that primarily lost. Mum had paid cash for all of her properties and just worked to pay them off. So she started again and done the same. But some of the biggest challenges that I observed for Mum and through Mum was she'd become so frugal, so tight, that she could never ever enjoy it.
No.
And it was horrible to see that. You know, for someone to have worked so hard and to do what she'd done, but then not to have enjoyed any aspect of it. I mean, so much so, we'd live in the, earlier on, we lived in the West End of Newcastle, and Mum would get the bus from the West End to the East End because the bread was 5 pence cheaper. She had never thought that actually I'm spending an hour there and back. What was the value of that? She just simply saw the benefit of that product being cheaper.
Yeah.
So, very interesting upbringing, which consequently led to me starting work around about when I was 10. And that was delivering my elder brother's paper round. So it was literally slave labour because I didn't get paid. He got to keep the money for his paper round. I just seemed to deliver it.
Shocking.
Is the thing, yeah. And you know, but it taught me something.
Yeah.
Yeah, as in, blood isn't thicker than water at all. Is the thing. Yeah. And then I got a Saturday job working in a shop, and I got paid £5. And I'd take that money home and give it to Mum. And then that's what I've done ever since. Yeah. So finished studying. My elder brother had moved to London, so I decided to shoot off down there and went to London and managed to get a really cushy number with the civil servants as an evaluation officer at Spring Gardens, which is just off Trafalgar Square for the British Council. So worked there, was earning lots of money, had a job on an evening at the Canon Ionic Cinema at Golders Green, where I seen Days of Thunder 298 times.
Wow.
I probably know the words better than Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. Yeah, was the thing. So and it was a great experience, you know, being in the big smoke and working and learning. But I got homesick, missed Mum, and missed the Northeast. So came back and met someone, and it was quite unusual. So, you know, going back to that cultural and religious thing. So I remember when I was about 18 and I had a white girl come knocking on the door. And it was like, oh my God. You know, honestly, it was like the most dramatic thing in the world. Particularly my brothers and sisters and things like that were like, what? Someone's actually been audacious to knock on the door. But then later on after London, I met someone and sort of, you know, developed that relationship. Mum didn't approve of it at all, which was quite interesting. And it was quite conflicting if you think about it. You know, so you're in a relationship with someone, the biggest and the best, the person that you love the most doesn't agree with it. It's a challenge. And then that relationship developed, and we ended up having a baby. So whilst Mum didn't necessarily accept the relationship, she loved my daughter, and doted on her, and it was amazing to see Mum really develop that relationship. And you know, sometimes it's in the writing or not, but then that relationship didn't work out, and you know, Mum was I told you so, you know, as mums do, is the thing, and I became a single parent, which was quite unusual and very unorthodox. I mean, just roll back a little bit. So when I had Yasmin, I thought to myself, I really need to start doing something with my life. So started working as a temp at an organisation at the time called United Artists, which was then became Telewest and now is better known as Virgin Media. And started off as a temp. And I remember working on the evenings in a collection department. So it was great because the hours were, I'd go in at 8 p.m. and I'd finish about 4 p.m., 4 a.m. even. So I'd come in and see my daughter and spend time with her and have the day and all of that. And it was just a lovely relationship, you know, to be able to devote and dedicate to my daughter. And then moved into a call centre and grew. Both myself and the organisation. So I ended up being a manager in the call centre. And then eventually set up a night shift. So it was the first time that we'd started offering 24/7 customer service. And you'd think, why would people want 24/7 customer service? Well, it was all the big pay-per-view events and things like that. And then it was the introduction of Television X and things like that. And yeah, so we've done that. And on a night time, there was limited calls and call traffic. So I'd get all my work done and lead the team. And the team, you know, loved that. We had a great relationship. And I suppose one of the best tips is, you know, if you develop your team where they know what's expected from them and they know equally what's expected from you, you can start to really work together and gel. And we done that. So I'd get bored quite quickly, and it was Windows 3.1 at the time, and I'd play around with the system and, you know, download Solitaire from where I wasn't meant to, and almost hack into where these games were kept because I was bored. And the IT manager at the time used to come up and go, Ammar, you need to stop doing this. By the way, can you run this bill run for me? Can you oversee this? And we were using S9000s and all these mainframe servers, and billing and everything happened overnight. So I got interested in IT, but not from a technical point of view, more just what it could do. So I'm talking about 96, 97. And then the IT manager said, actually, our IT is changing, and there's a role there for, it's called IT service delivery. It's a new methodology that's coming about. I think you'd be ideally suited for it. So all of a sudden, I got the job, and I moved out of the call centre and tripled my wage overnight. So it was fantastic, and loved it. So I became the regional coordinator for IT service delivery. Learned quite a lot during that time, and it was round about that time that my relationship failed. So I became a single parent, and Mum sort of stepped in, and you know, just thinking back, Mum was like, great. As in, she had Yasmin that she brought up. And then some of the projects I was involved and responsible for were really, people use the term cutting edge, but they were. So things like outsourcing call centres. We'd went up to the Outer Hebrides to look at outsourcing. So there's an organisation on the Isle of Stornoway.
Of all places.
Yeah, as in, and they were a Microsoft Gold partner at that, but they were serviced by microwaves. So the telephone line was a microwave. So if the weather changed or whatever else, so we were always a bit concerned by that. But it was an incredible experience. I mean, I remember flying in from Glasgow, and the person taking your bags off the airline was the taxi driver who worked down the pub. Who, you know, it was one of those places. And because I was an IT afterthought, so the director of customer service and director of whatever, they'd booked into this hotel. and I was put in a bed and breakfast with Mrs. MacDonald.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a scary experience. Yeah, I remember thinking, because it was in the middle of nowhere, and I'm sure I could hear werewolves, right? And the driver dropped me off, and I was thinking, do I not want to just go back and stay with everybody else? And, I remember wedging my bed against the door because there was only myself and Mrs. MacDonald there. Yeah, it was the thing. Anyway, that was an interesting
Another lesson in werewolves.
yeah. But so outsourced call centres, developed 24/7 operations for the business. Built a data centre, managed a data centre in Knowsley, which was one of the most advanced data centres of the time. So really great experience there for over 10 years, but got sick of travelling and missed my daughter a lot. I missed mum. I missed the Northeast. I thought, I just want to be here. So came back, and at the time, a friend had a property company. So this was around about 2002, 2003. And he said, and he'd grown it. And he said, Ammar, could you consider running it? And I thought, yeah, I'll give it a go. So I took a small share in it and then grew it from it being worth around about 3 to around about 30 million in less than 2 years. And I thought, why am I doing this for someone else?
Yeah.
I need to do it for myself. Yeah. So, and the grass isn't always greener, and it never ever works out. You know, there's a whole host of things, fundamentally luck, and timing, and all of these things that influence a business. So, set up a property company, yes, developed a property portfolio, done lots of developments, but I really missed the corporate life and really missed helping people. And, one of the things you mentioned or asked earlier on is, what's your why? So, being a young, or being an Asian or a Pakistani kid at the time, I used to help people to fit in. You know, as a child, I always wanted to just help people because I just wanted to be like part of whatever it was. And then eventually I'd done it for so long that I really enjoyed it. And I do it. And I've continued to do it, you know, because of the buzz and the reward I get. And it's sad because people are sometimes suspicious as, why do you want to help? And you go, well, just because I like to see other people do well. Yeah, so it was interesting that what was almost a need early on in life translated into a want. And I genuinely love, and in particular the Northeast. Yeah, so roll forward, property company, roll forward, consultancy company, and then started to give away a lot of my time round about 2003, 2004. My parents were teachers, so I wouldn't want to do teaching. It doesn't pay enough, but I get the importance of it.
Yes.
So I became a governor of a school in Walker, and then started sitting on local strategic partnerships with local authorities representing the private sector. And then around about 2007, 2008, I sat there. And all of this was done outside of the Asian community. So whilst my late father was the leader of the Asian community, I just went off and done my own thing and had done so relatively successfully. And 2007, 2008, part of my consultancy business, I started getting approached by lots of people Asian people working in restaurants, takeaways, different types of businesses, asking for advice and guidance. And then I was sat around tables and I started asking the question, how do you communicate to the Asian community? And the response was, we don't, and we don't know how to. So there wasn't a representative body that people could communicate through and to, whereas in other areas they were quite significant and established. And actually, the Northeast doesn't have a huge Asian population, but it has a quite vibrant one and a hugely entrepreneurial one as well.
Yes.
So when the crash happened, 2007, 2008, I'd sort of thought, okay, we need to do something to address the non-existence of a trade body, first and foremost. But once again, with my ethos of wanting to give back, purposefully created a social enterprise. So we commissioned some research, and there were some wonderful people involved in that research to demonstrate, A, the fact that there wasn't support there, but B, the potential impact of there being support. And set up Asian Business Connexions in 2009, not-for-profit social enterprise. And that was unheard of. And social enterprises weren't that popular at the time as well. And it's meant to be a not-for-profit, but actually it turned into a significant loss. You know, it was a hobby for me. So we started to make a difference, brought people together, went to One Northeast. Originally they were dismissive of the fact that their business support doesn't reach Asian businesses, but then they acknowledged the research that had been done and said, right, we're going to support you, and the local authorities had said, we're going to support you. And then that landscape all changed. So that support never materialized. But we'd already started to make a difference. We'd already started to help businesses start or scale, or started developing training programs. So we continued it, and it's been a very expensive hobby. I think if the wife ever finds out how much I've spent, should be anyway. Let's not go there. No. But yeah, so Asian Business Connexions. Yeah, so it's it primarily aim is to connect, support, and promote the Asian and wider community. And whilst we prioritised Asian businesses, my ambition was always around inclusivity. So it's developed, and if you come to any of the events, or if you experience any of the programs that have been developed, they're very inclusive. Yeah, so they're quite reflective of the community. So 70-80% of the people are white, because that it's reflective of our Northeast, and I think that's really important. I'm always not necessarily against, but I disagree with exclusive focus. So whatever that is, because then you're potentially alienating other people by virtue of that. So we've developed a whole range of programs, from 2-week well-being and business boot camps for those that are unemployed, to professional MOTs, to whole host of things. And I'm very, very proud of the organisation. And this year, it's 10th anniversary. We've helped create 400 and odd new startups. We've helped train thousands of people. We've connected organisations across the globe, took trade missions to India and vice versa. So ABC is something I'm very passionate about, and I'm passionate about the fact that it's been born here. The other thing is around education, creating a charity called the Primary Inspiration Through Enterprise. So just talking briefly about my role with being a governor. So historically, governors are really old, retired, academic people. Fuddy-duddies, as you might want to describe them, or whatever that is, right? And that's a flippant remark, and I apologise if anyone's offended by it, but it's just a matter of fact, isn't it? So I equally, I didn't want to be a passive person. I didn't want to just turn up and read some papers and go, oh yes, this is great, and then the kids go, oh, the governors are here, or there's an Ofsted, or whatever that is, I wanted it to be a meaningful relationship. And the other thing is to highlight, I don't get involved in things unless I can add value. So I'm not there just because. And if I ever find myself being in those positions, I'd withdraw and sort of politely decline being involved. So this is a school in Walker. It from a poverty point of view, one of the most poverty-stricken areas, 3rd, 4th level of unemployment, and a whole host of other negative connotations and labels. Plus side, they're from the Northeast. These are really proud and passionate people. They just don't know how to channel and funnel that pride and that passion. So working with the school and the head teacher, we started developing an enterprise because I'm a business person.
Mm-hmm.
So where's my skill set? I'm not an educationalist,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't profess to be.
Mm-hmm.
But we then developed an enterprise program, brought the community together, and it was incredible when we launched this initiative. So I donated a shop to 4 schools in Walker
Mm-hmm.
to get them to run a business.
Mm-hmm.
And the parents came along, and it was the best turnout they've ever had. You know, so forget about parents' evenings or whatever it is. So the grandparents came along and things like that. And it was incredible to see, you know, the parents of some of these pupils sort of saying, look, I'm just a window cleaner, right? I love what you're doing, but how can I contribute? And I says, well, you're not just a window cleaner. You're a business person.
Mm-hmm.
You're running an enterprise,
Mm-hmm.
and the skills that you can share and teach that are amazing for young people to learn.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that we need to be encouraging and developing. So it was very much around a local-based, place-based approach.
Mm.
So these kids experience how to set up a business. They interview one another for roles within the business. They are given some seed money to run a business, and then experts coming to the school. I mean, James, you were there, weren't you?
I was Friday last week
Yeah,
doing stage 1,
yeah.
which was
How was it?
I loved it. I don't know if the kids had more fun or if I did, because the first stage was the foam airplanes that you
Yeah,
make to
yeah.
throw them a distance, and
Yeah,
and that just brought back memories of when I was the same age.
right.
The code combat challenge. I mean, I was just amazed to go into a school and see it was a year 5 class
Yeah,
on computers using Python code commands.
yeah.
I mean, they were all brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
It's
They loved it.
fantastic.
And it's the enthusiasm. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, what, we're allowed to do this in school as
Yeah.
part of school, but it was very creative. And it was, the more I thought about it, the Code Combat Challenge, it wasn't just about moving a character through a room to collect gems or get to the goal. There were a lot of skills that they were using, developing. It was planning ahead. It
Yeah.
was learning from your mistakes. There were lots of things that I thought, this is fantastic. So I can't wait for the next
Next
stage.
stage, yeah.
I've told Peter as well, who's coordinating the Pi Project too, that he said his school was going to win, but I said not if I had anything
Yeah,
to do
good.
about it. So,
Uh-oh.
Fantastic.
so a bit of
And
competition.
that's what it's all about,
Mm,
right?
it's great.
It's about getting kids to experience. So it's about getting them to experience firsthand what business is all about, but more
Yes.
importantly, for them to recognize their strengths
Yes.
and
Yeah.
also identify weaknesses.
Mm.
So you can then start
Mm.
working on promoting what they're really good at,
Yes.
whilst recognizing what they're not so good at,
Mm.
but doing so early on. So creating this charity and then subsequently going out and rolling that out to hundreds of schools and thousands of kids, but more importantly, getting, you know, businesses and individuals like your good selves involved in it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you get the importance of it, but B, it's using the skills that you have.
Mhm.
So, I think it's great people going in, standing in front of a school and delivering an assembly, but, you know, the kids don't know me. And all they see is some flashy Asian dude in a fast car with a shiny watch, right? Well, that's what they see.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's like, what does he know about X, Y, Z?
Mm.
Well, I was a kid, you know, as
Yes.
in, and I still try and be one
Mm.
as much as I can.
Mhm.
But where they do get it is when you're working together.
Mm.
So, Pi Project, and then creating this Primary to Prosperity campaign, which is, you know, just typifies the Northeast.
Mm.
So bringing together a whole host of initiatives, starting at primary age, and then providing the scaffolding for people, regardless of who and where they are,
Yep.
to realise their ambitions and raise their aspiration. Yeah, so that's the plan, that's
Yeah.
the vision. And some of that's manifested itself through my own personal experiences. So I was in the cadets, so we launched the cadet apprenticeship pathway, whereby this is work-ready young people who employers and businesses need and want and can't find them.
Mm.
Yeah, because as an apprentice, or you're trying to secure an apprentice, where do you go and find someone who's work ready. It's such a challenge.
I can imagine, yeah.
Such a challenge. Well, here's a pool of those. And then, going through professional MOTs, and it's all about collaboration. That's the approach I've always taken, is very much bringing in good quality people with a shared ambition to create movements and campaigns rather than interventions. Because an intervention is just something that has a start and a finish and doesn't really lead to things. So you mentioned competitiveness. I've always been competitive. I compete with myself. That's how competitive I am. And being first was something that, so going back to the need to fit in, then to the want. Well, part of the need to fit in or trying to fit in, you just want to be number one. And trying to do that throughout my life has been, very interesting and challenging. So I was, one of the youngest governors, school governors. I was the youngest chair of governors. I was the first Geordie Asian, as I'll describe it, to be appointed a commander of the British Empire, CBE by the Queen. I mean, gosh, I thought someone was having a laugh, when I got that phone call, when they announced that. And then, because I'd never heard of a CBE. And, winning so many awards and accolades, and it's great. Don't get me wrong, I think we should encourage everyone to experience that. But it's not the be-all and end-all. What I love to see, genuinely, is that kid who had supported 7 years ago through the charity, through the activities, to go on and actually become something, and sort of say, I've become something. It's that reward of helping a fledgling startup and providing them with some advice and guidance, and then see them become this significant concern. And if you think about how many businesses we've worked with, and some of them are big names now, and it's great to see that. And not because I can sit there and publicly go, oh, well, I've supported them. More just because I was involved a little bit in their journey. And, they're doing well. And then the other point, I suppose, is I've failed many a time, but I don't see it as failure. And I never ever call it that. It's always lessons learned. So I equally disagree with the sentiment that failure should be your target, right? Because there's almost a mindset now coming about where it's, of course, it's okay to fail, right? But that shouldn't be your goal.
No.
And we shouldn't be instilling that in anyone, right? It should be.
We see it a lot, though, don't we? Yeah, it's that kind of, ooh, yes, let's try and fail.
Because you have to fail to succeed. And that's not quite true. The likelihood is you failed a few times before you've succeeded.
Yes.
But there are occasions where you've just succeeded.
Yes. Yeah.
We always say that there's at the Entrepreneur Accelerator that we're a part of, there's that Japanese proverb, 4 down, 7 times, get up 8.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that kind of, it's that ability to get up. And if you're used to failing, it's kind of, oh, well, let's get to the next failure.
Yeah. Let's just keep failing. Because and you go, why is that your goal? That's just incredible.
Because no one sets out, in my head, with the mindset of, it's exactly what you're saying, I'm going to fail at this. I'm going to take a risk. I believe in this. I see an opportunity. I'm going to run with it.
Yeah.
And it's just as you say, you're going to pick up things that actually, if I look back, I should have done this. I shouldn't have done that. But that's what I've learned from, and I've helped to take on to the next opportunity to make that a success.
And it is about that learning, James. No, you're absolutely right. It is about that learning. And I've learned so much. Yeah. Both personally and professionally. So I suppose, some of the top tips just to end up on, as in what type of advice or top tips. And it's incredible because everyone pretty much knows these things.
Mm-hmm.
So the top tip is practice rather than preach. And because all too often, we are all good at preaching. So planning, simple things like planning, sort of a minute spent on planning saves 10 minutes in the doing.
Yep.
That's a matter of fact. And I've realized that so many times. I'm an entrepreneur. I jump in. I like to just get going. It's all about the action.
Yeah.
But then you realize how important it is to plan that action. Otherwise, you're just wasting a lot of energy, time, cost.
Yes.
Is what you do.
Reminds me of that. Is it an Abraham Lincoln quote where he says, if I've got 8 hours to cut down a tree, I'll spend 6 of them sharpening the axe.
Yeah.
Rings a vague bell. I don't know, James.
I'm just a font of
Abraham Lincoln.
quotes and
Excellent.
something like that. But it's that theme of plan something prior to jump in.
Without
it's
a
of
doubt.
both, isn't it?
Without a doubt. And have faith and hope. Hope's an incredible word. And it is probably best illustrated through Star Wars.
Yes.
As in, and having hope, right, is one of probably the best thing that any human can have. Because having hope means you have the potential. It's not a given, but there's the potential that something's going to happen sometime.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's, for me, that's what feels like. So say my experience with the Pi project in the school last week. If you're in a scenario where you're in a school or a community where you're almost told, don't expect much of life, you've been dealt a poor set of cards, I find that that's giving hope to say, actually, it doesn't matter where you're born, whether you had 2 parents, grew up with 1 parent, or your grandparents brought you up, it doesn't matter. If you've got the desire, the drive, and an idea, you can really achieve anything you want.
Absolutely. And I'll have to apologise because my stomach's rumbling a little bit. Whether the microphone's picked that up or not. But no, look, going back to the point about the Northeast, we are incredible people here, right? As in, we just need some of that desire, that direction and dedication, because that's the most important thing. So statistically speaking, I shouldn't be sat here. I shouldn't have achieved what I should have achieved. Gosh, I grew up from a single parent who had nothing. I'm an Asian. I was this. I was that. I was all of these labels and statistics that. And don't get me wrong. I've had trials and tribulations throughout my life. I'm not a saint, and I never ever professed to be. Although I was born on St. David's Day.
Oh well.
But my point being is you can absolutely achieve whatever you want. I mean, touch wood, right? If I had to start all over again tomorrow, I'd hate the thought of it, right? It'd be hard, but I'd do it. And that's what resilience is.
Yeah.
And because of what I've done and learnt, hopefully I'll not be starting as far back. So I can apply a lot of that. So, that's, for me, the most important thing and the most important trait of Northeast is we are resilient people. And we need to change that mood music, right? We need to encourage kids. They can be everything they want to be.
Yes.
And through the Pi project, because look, everybody gets making money, right? So everybody, regardless of age, gets making money. So you go into Walker or wherever it is where people don't have a lot of it, and you say to a child, you're going to be an engineer, you're going to be an IT coding, and they go home and they go, oh, Mum, Dad, I want to be an engineer. And they're like, why would you want to do that? Because they don't get it, right? So no one's an engineer. The closest thing anyone's to working is low-skilled, low-level job. And even that is, not encouraged at all.
Outside of the norm.
Well, so the ambition is get a council house, have a baby, repeat, that type of cycle.
Yeah.
And certainly it was and has been. But we need to encourage these kids. And how do you do it? Well, actually, the golden thread is teach them how to make money,
Yep.
right? Teach them how business operates.
Mm-hmm.
And when they go home, the parents can contribute, right? And get the parents involved. So we're running summer camps
Mm-hmm.
where parents come in and in parallel to the pupils, because they come into the local school, so they connect with that school. And in parallel to their children, they're getting skills and they're being taught an enterprise qualification,
Mm.
you know, and they're getting value. And then they're coming together to do some joint challenges, introducing competitiveness, creating bonding,
Mm-hmm.
and all of those things to familiarize and encourage that ambition and aspiration.
Mm.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So the future is all about primary to prosperity,
Mm.
and it's all about highlighting the great things that happen within our region, and it's all about, you know, promoting strengths.
Perfect.
And that's, in many ways, that's one of our one of our goals we like to have with the podcast, inspiring others. I've often, from my experiences of living in other countries, I certainly found being in New York, in America in general, the attitude is, it's whether it's the American dream, if you want to call it that, is it doesn't really matter where you come from, what your upbringing was. I can actually be whatever I wish.
Yeah.
If I want to be president, if I want to be head of a massive company, if I want to set up the next coolest clothing brand, I can make it happen. So part of that is what we're trying to do is bring that, not necessarily to be American, but I think there's a definite mindset that they have, which is, actually, do you know what, I can achieve anything.
Yeah.
And if we can just drip feed that and get more and more people and create this surge in a great region where you've got very personable people, that work ethic that I think is genetic, potentially. Well, what a great place to create something.
Amazing. So well done on what you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
I'm delighted to be a very small part of it. I'm very, very grateful for you sharing inspirational messages.
Excellent. Well, thank you ever so much for us coming in to see you today.
Great.
Yes.
And thank you for coming to see me today as well, with your fabulous kit that you've got here.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a dork. I love the technology.
Good.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks everyone for listening. Check out all the show notes at inspirationnorth.com. Join us again for the next episode when we'll be chatting to another inspirational person. If you like this, subscribe and tell your friends. If you didn't like this, subscribe anyway and tell everybody.